Abundance is about all of that. It's about remembering who you are, really knowing it inside, really embracing it and really embodying it. Once you master self-love, you don't need love from others. You're an independent, no longer codependent individual. Taking the sins of humanity on myself is not about hanging on the cross like I did. It's about daily sacrificing myself from my higher perspective to come in and be in the flesh. To me, true enlightenment means that no matter what comes, you still choose love.
I am Jason Abraham, the Shadow Teacher, 33 Warrior of Truth and the Grand Illusion, sharing yet another revelation conversation with writer, philosopher, researcher, master of the ancient sciences and lost wisdom, keeper of the great arcanum, Arc Source One, Jonathan Johnson.
Jason, it's becoming quite an adventure. This is becoming something that's funner and funner every time we do it.
Every single time. And so we've been venturing into personal development when you've been mentoring me on camera, which has been kind of cool. And God knows what my life is going to look like when these go up. They'll go up several weeks after we film them.
Yeah.
And we also venture into these concepts of the unseen world and philosophy and the spiritual nature of life. And today, let's go with something more practical, something practical for me, something practical for people who are walking out into the abyss, who are letting go of familiarity, of old patterns, of a diminished identity. And what I am alluding to is the abundance mentality. Hear a lot of talk about abundance and abundance mindset. What is the abundance mentality to you, Jonathan? Versus a scarcity mentality, which is the mentality of someone who is diminished and limited.
Wow. First of all, I didn't expect the subject that we cover to apply so heavily to the whole thing that we've been sharing as the message. Because to me, the abundance mindset, a lot of people think, oh, it's wealth, money, family, fulfillment, prosperity, so many different names. But I noticed that most of the abundance mindset is geared towards money because people feel particularly challenged in that area, so they have to really hone in on it, focus in on it, and make sure that it works out. But I noticed that even just this message, a lot of the stuff we've been sharing so far is the abundance mindset. And it goes back to the interview we just did just last time, when you shared some of your breathwork and your journey and your perspective. To me, abundance mindset is financial as well, but it's also having good food to eat, good company, joy, laughter, a wonderful home life, maybe even a good, profound, expressive social life, friend group. But to me, it goes even further than that. And I find it interesting that I get the chance to share the stuff that we talked about last time, about, doing a past life and remembering your divinity or your power, your inner strength, and who you really, really are in the more of the, in the celestial framework. Because to me, abundance is about all of that. It's about remembering who you are, really knowing it inside, really embracing it and really embodying it. And I think you said that last time. You were a little, it's hard to figure out how to remember who you are, but then embody it inside of a physical body. It gets to be very challenging. And I think for me, my whole mindset is trying to share a mindset of more abundance in all areas of our life, whether it's spiritual, it's financial, friendships, because to really know what, who, from whence you came, that is abundance. Because instead of feeling like just a human who goes to work, who pays taxes, who's worried about their kids and their family, to knowing who you really are and embracing that as your true identity, and then anchoring that down into the physical. Now, to me, that's the highest form of abundance, because through the process of embracing your divine aspect, or who you really are, that's when things really start to line up and become truly abundant, because you're living from a place of divinity and you're living from a place of your own personal power. If you can live from a place of personal power, that means you're somewhat familiar with and empowered by who you really are, your real nature. And I noticed that happened to you in the breath work we did. You felt you were full of all that you were. You were full of all the expressions of yourself, and it made you abundant in your beingness. So for me, abundance is more about a mindset that then leads to knowing the full capacity of what you really are. If people knew their full capacity, they'd sure as hell be done asking me for advice or for anything, and they'd be done praying. There'd be a lot of things that would become obsolete if people reached the highest form of abundance, which is to know thyself. Because if you know thyself, you naturally are in a greater alignment with your higher self, like people like to call it, your spirit self, your angelic self, your celestial self, whatever particular titles people like to put on it, or just being more in alignment with Source. So if you're in alignment with Source, you'll be able to live in alignment more easily, and things will gravitate towards you, things will grow in your presence, things will become more just by you being there. People will feel more loved by you being in relationship with them. People would feel more fulfilled and abundant themselves, so you'd start to grow abundance around you. So, what I saw you do last week in the breath work, that to me was a huge expression of abundance, because you were seeing Jason in a different perspective, in your more angelic or higher perspective. And if you can merge your human beingness to your higher expression of who you are, your Source or your God aspect, whatever people like, then things really become abundant, because even death flees from you when you know that you're a divine angel, because it's not real anymore. You know that all things of lack and limitation and suffering and things, they start to disappear in the light of who you really are. So that's kind of what I think of as abundance. I don't really think of it in the financial point of view. I think of it as, if I'm embodying me, all the things I need will come.
Yeah, that brought out a few ideas for me. So what you're speaking is basically ancient wisdom from mystery schools, from secret societies. Rudolf Steiner gets a lot of talk these days, and he was a Rosicrucian, a theosophist, and then he developed his own system, which is anthroposophy. And one of his concepts is that there are two beings that humanity deals with. You have Ahriman, who we talked to, and Ahriman is the materialism, the density. So much of what you mentioned that most people associate with abundance, the money, the status, the sex, this is very Ahrimanic. It's very much of the material world. And the other aspect is Lucifer, and Lucifer is more of a spiritual nature of this is all a simulation, and your truth is this light that's outside of this. But the call again is to integrate Lucifer and Ahriman, bring them into the center, and then Steiner calls this the Christ spirit awakening, when Lucifer, when the spirit is embodied. So Lucifer and Ahriman are embodied in the human and meet in the middle. The Christ spirit awakens, and the way you described abundance sounds very similar to that.
Yeah, that's exactly, I guess, what I was trying to say is exactly that. Not knowing, I don't know anything about Steiner's teachings or principles, but yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to convey is the merging of the two, the marriage. People talk about in the New Testament, they're talking about the wedding of the bride, and they call it the church and all these different things, but that's not really what it is. It's actually the marriage between the higher and the lower. It's the marriage between the spirit and the flesh. It's the union of the masculine and feminine, and that's exactly what it sounds like Steiner is trying to articulate.
Yes, and we're kind of going, we've spoken about this in previous videos, the difference between the divine voice versus our ego.
Oh, yeah.
And so the ego can get actually caught up, most people think of the ego getting caught up in the Ahrimanic traps, which is of money and status and power. But the ego can also get caught up in Lucifer, like with the spiritual arrogance too, feeling that you're better because you understand you're into all the spirituality. And again, true abundance and true embodiment is when you're living from that divine nature and the divine calling, which you would radiate a certain kind of energy. You simply are just going to show up a certain way in the world that is where I guess you would just, best way of saying it is because you are what you are, you're able to give your gift freely, openly, the gift of your soul, what you're here to offer, and then what you need to do that just comes because of the energy you're putting out that you're connected to.
Yeah, it's the divine alignment. I was just sharing that with friends this morning. That divine alignment is all that's required because the divine, you are divine. So if you're divine, then that means you have a divine purpose. If you have a divine purpose, then that means it's already written in your DNA. So all that's left for you to do is surrender and be an active participant in the divine will that's already inside of you. It's like a seed. People, if you plant a seed in the ground and pour water on it and cover it with soil, it doesn't have to try to grow. It just needs a little sunlight, some water, and soil, and then the rest is part of its divine blueprint. It just starts to unfold. And the thing about people is they have the ego mind that thinks it knows what to do and how to control everything, and then the other mind, the divine mind, knows the blueprint. It knows what you are and what you need in order to fulfill your purpose. So very often in two diverging paths, but like you said, sometimes the very harmonic energy can attach to the other and then try to use that for its own means and try to control that as well. The thing I have found is it's in the middle. It's in that center point. It's like if you have a merry-go-round, you get in the middle, there's no more turmoil. As soon as you find the center of it, or the center of a tornado, there's no more push-pull, there's no more force. And so that's what I imagine it as always, because if you're always trying to reach higher for the spiritual realms and go out of body and astral project and lucid dream and do drugs.
Luciferian.
Yes, yeah. If you're always doing that, make no mistake, being angelic can be just as problematic and cause just as much harm to you as the other, as being too rigid, too cold, too dominating, too mathematical, too left brain all the time. You can get so much one way or the other that you completely lose who you are. And that's, to me, true abundance isn't left or right or higher or lower. It's the very middle. It's the center. And the center is where you find your equilibrium. And once you find equilibrium, the divine creation that's all around you naturally sends everything you need your way in order to develop. Just like a seed. I mean, think of how many trees there are in the world that have never had any help or cooperation or never had an agenda or a plan. They just were planted. That's all that was required. And next thing you know, there's this giant oak tree standing there. No one made it do that. So who's in control? Is it really the ego, or is it the divine itself? Because to me, when I talk, I think a lot of people think too that the divine that I'm speaking of is the angelic realm, and that isn't it either. I'm not talking about my higher self. I'm talking about there's my higher self, there's my lower self, which is the human form, but there's a middle that is the divine or God, and I don't even call it spirit, because spirit's still part of the higher realms. The spirit is part of the angelic realms. I'm actually referring to the singularity or the middle path, God. That's where Mother and Father reside, is in that singularity, in the source, the center of all creation. That's where they hold access. And the access that they hold is also within each and every individual person. So to me, the journey towards God is simply a journey towards the center of oneself, to find that center point and then do your best to stay in it for the rest of your journey. That's my interpretation.
So you referred to, again, this powerful breath work that you did with me and what you saw in me, and that vision again of this angelic being sprouting wings of fire, becoming this being of fire. And again, I'm pretty fresh off of that.
Yeah,
That's been just a week since I've done that.
Week, yeah.
And I got a sense of the truth of who I am and my divine nature. But what I've found going through the week, there have been plenty of challenges that have really made it hard for me to remember that and believe that.
Yeah.
So what practical advice, you can just talk to me, but for someone else, I'm sure has gone through that, they've had a taste, they may have gone to a plant medicine ceremony or breath work, or just had their own transcendental experience where they got to feel the truth of who they are, and yet they haven't spent enough time in this new identity, so they still have some of the old habits and the old nature that are still pulling on them. What advice would you give to someone who is shifting into more of this divine alignment but isn't there yet? That's not their natural state. That's not where they haven't been there long enough. They got a taste of it.
I think that in your case and in anyone's case that's in that similar position is just complete trusting and not trying to regain it or retreat from it. Just it's that loose, like we spoke in another video previous, is just that relaxation. Just know that when it comes up and it shows you your true form and the beauty and the wonder and the magnitude of who you really are, let that be enough. And then it will gradually, with just a loose grip, just let it be. And then when the time is right and you're ready, it's kind of like your spirit's trying to... It's like your spirit and your ego are trying to learn to dance.
Oh, yeah. So I'll share this. So what I've found is I have a greater awareness of my true nature and what is right for me. And I still am getting some... I did a cord cutting, but some of those voices are still very loud, very present with me. But I haven't yielded to them. I've made different decisions, but it's really, it's been a lot of willpower for me to do that. But what I can say is there has been a greater awareness of when I'm in my real self and when I'm not. And I remember we went to dinner after the breath work, and your wife asked me, Jason, are you able to tell when it's your real voice or when it's the false voice or the ego? And I can. And so I've been able to successfully listen to my real voice, but that other voice has still been super loud because there hasn't been enough time that's passed yet.
Yeah, what I notice is it's kind of a path that I've seen happen with individuals. I remember my own. At first it was so brutal, I was just getting tossed about, beaten up, didn't know what was going on. Life was traumatic and painful, had no idea. But then as I started getting glimpses of my divinity, I started noticing that the voice would get louder. And you remember right before you breathe, you did that breath. Remember how powerful it was?
So which voice are you referring to? The divine voice or the negative voice?
The negative voice.
Yes.
Because when you...
Interesting. That's what I've experienced.
Yeah, when you outlast and you withhold and you're strong enough to make it through those earlier storms, the closer you get to that breakthrough of remembering your true power and your true strength, the more that voice or that part of you will try to stop you. It's like it's self-sabotaging. It wants to make sure that you don't get across that point of no return. Yeah. And you did that. And as soon as you break through the hardest hits you've ever taken and you're just ready to give in and just give up, there's always that breaking point where your sheer will and the Spirit guiding you to do so will push you past the severity of the voice enough to where you can get a glimpse of your divinity that's hiding behind the monster that keeps trying to keep you away from it. And you'll get a glimpse of it, and then that'll reassure you, and that'll make you even more convicted and more, it'll give you more perseverance, it'll give you more focus, but you also know, it's like you get a glimpse behind the curtain just enough to give you a little more to keep going. And then that voice will really start shouting and really start telling you all kinds of complicated narratives, or even just tell you to do something. And you'll want to obey. You'll want to with everything in you. You're just like, I got to do it, But if you just stay focused on that memory that you have of your divine state, or who you really are, your true power, it gives you the strength to outlast that voice a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And if you keep doing that, you'll get bigger and bigger glimpses of who you really are. And then eventually that voice, it'll blow up one last time. It'll cause one huge last upset in that line of thinking, and then it goes quiet because it realizes it lost and it can't keep influencing you.
Yeah, and so what I've found too is I've had to reinforce the divine identity. I've had to watch motivational videos. I've been having synchronicity sometimes in the books I've been reading. Like I would get the perfect passage to remind me, oh, you did the right thing, you're on the right path. And that's something I've had to augment again, because that voice has been so almost unbearably loud with me, but I haven't broken at this point.
Yeah, and that's what it means to be a warrior of truth, or a warrior of light, or a warrior of God. It doesn't matter what phrase you like, but that's what it means. It means I will not acquiesce, I will not back down. You are not that voice, and the voice in here and the voice out there that's always telling me that I should be afraid and that I got to do this and I got to obey that. And all of that control is to get you to acquiesce, to get you to back off. Because what it all wants from you is for you to stay down and stop trying to be your own sovereign. Stop trying to be your own person. Stop trying to step into that powerful, beautiful, loving expression that you really are. But it wants to make sure you don't do that. So it will very much try to stop you right before you break through the
yeah,
other side.
And this particular voice knows that I have a powerful warrior spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and she wants to control it. So that's specifically what I'm aware of the dynamic right now of what's going on. But
yeah, and I'm glad you're doing motivation, because that's
saying no to it.
yeah, and that's it. And sometimes the voice is so loud and so sublime and so twisted and so subtle in its offerings to you that sometimes it's hard to discern the difference between, wait, no, that's still not good. It might sound good now, but it's still not the right thing to be doing. That's why I did breathwork for 4 or 5 years straight, is because I was in that battle, fully immersed, and I had no choice but to get up every day, put the earphones in, put on the real strong, positive reinforcement, warrior type motivation, and get to breathing. And I couldn't relent for a long time, for like 4 years, because the battle got so intense, and it got so subtle and so brutal, and it gets so complicated and so complex that you can't tell. So what I learned to do is if it isn't about love, I don't want anything to do with it. If it's about fear or inconvenience or discomfort or pain, it's not an option. And so the discernment grows and grows and grows with practice, just like if you use a sword. First it's heavy, it's hard to wield, but then after a while, the sword gets easier and easier to wield. And once you get to a certain point, you don't even need the sword anymore. You just realize that this is what is causing it. And then you stop causing it, you stop allowing the thoughts at all. And then eventually you overcome all of it and you no longer are subject to it at all. And that's actually with the analogy of drawing the sword from the stone, is actually that whole principle of removing yourself from left or right, from good or bad, and finding that you are the middle, and finding that the sword is actually you.
So let's, I'm going to rephrase that in sort of 3D language. So initially, like, our behavior is still the old self. And we're shifting out of this old behavior, which is very tempting to do. Those old voices in our head want us to go back into that old behavior. So we have to go through a period where we're really putting new voices in our head so that we behave in a different way. We show up in a different way that's congruent with the voices that are guiding us and reinforcing the truth of who we are and who we need to show up as. And then when we've had enough proof, when we've had enough evidence by consistently showing up that way, then these voices of temptation just kind of go away because they really don't have any power, because we've now provided more actual evidence that nope, I'm not that anymore. I'm this, which I'm showing up as now, and now I believe it because it's reinforced. But initially, you have to have that faith, as you said. You have to. It starts with faith, and then doing what you need to do, whether it be motivational videos or putting your headphones on and brainwashing yourself, not picking up the phone to call or text that person you broke up with, whatever it may be, and then when you've gotten the proof of kind of going back to the abundance of like who you're showing up as is kind of, it's being reflected back, then the temptation, the voices of the devil, if you will, get more quiet or non-existent.
And it's interesting that you arrived back the voice of the devil. Like when I was in the wilderness for 40 days, I was hungry, I was tired, I was dealing with all of the stuff. It was all coming at me. And so he was trying to convince me to jump off a cliff. He was trying to get me to do all these different things. But that phrase saying, "Get thee behind me, Satan," what that's referring to is it's not a person I'm talking to. That's actually an inner dialogue. That voice that's always saying you should do that, or maybe you should try this, or no, don't do that, don't, or call them. That's what I'm referring to. It means get this straight. It means get in alignment. It means that voice, take a back seat, get behind me. It means you're not running this show. The divine is, so get behind me. And so in that aspect, it gets very loud, especially the closer you get to major breakthroughs or any kind of victories. For instance, right now, in particular, with the battle that's been ensuing, it's only getting warmed up, for starters, but the battle has been raging for me for thousands of years. And the closer I get to the end goal, the harder and harder and harder that voice and him, they're the same thing, one's just exterior, one's interior, gets louder and louder and louder to try to stop me, to try to stop the divine from fulfilling its fullest expression. And so when you're experiencing all of those things, when you want to pick up the phone, you're actually in real time winning and engaging in a dialogue inside of yourself of push and pull, of light and dark. That's what the war is all about. The war isn't actually an exterior thing. It happens in here first with everyone every day. And the better they get at adjusting to that, the easier and easier it gets. And you're going to find a place where you're going to go through this kind of a wall, but then it'll get easier because you've seen the glimpse of the divine. It'll help you with the battle.
Yeah, and something you mentioned too, you mentioned this briefly, but that voice can be very tricky. It can sound very appealing, and it can actually twist things, make you feel guilty for doing the right thing. It kind of try to shame you and make you feel guilty for doing what's actually the right thing for your path and your purpose, and really be appealing at making the wrong thing very tempting for you. So
yeah, and that goes even to addictions. You should just have one more drink.
One more drink.
Have one more cigarette, whatever it is. Just, you can worry about that tomorrow. It can be very convincing, very, very deliberate.
And so the embodiment, again, of the divine, it's a very upright power that you have. When the divine energy starts to takes shape in you. It fills you. It fills you, and it's very expansive. But when you lie to yourself, I made a video on my Shadow Teacher channel, one of my solo videos, and I quote the Metallica song "To Live Is to Die," and there's a soliloquy in there that says, when a man lies, he murders a part of the world. And these are the sad truths that men call their lives. And so when you lie to yourself, you lose that upright, expansive posture. You start to contract and hide in shame and guilt. And
Yeah, that's a pretty. I've probably heard that, but never paid attention to what it said. But that's a very poetic way of putting the very thing that we've been describing and talking about. It gets so subtle that, I mean, I'll be quite honest, even some of the spiritual practices can do that as well, not knowingly. Like, for instance, wanting to be blissed out all the time. Well, yeah, we all like bliss, but is it to avoid something? Is it to not look at something? I've achieved enlightenment in this life and in others, but it's not. I don't think it's what people think it is. To me, it's more about facing down the demons and realizing they're not real, rather than just avoiding them altogether. And that's also another thing I noticed is some of the spiritual community. You know, sitting in a monastery to achieve enlightenment, yes, it is hard. But tell me what's harder, doing that with a wife and kids and a mortgage. Tell me, what's harder when you're in relationships, when you're dealing with the reflections you keep seeing back, when you're dealing with the wounds of your past. Really, what's real enlightenment? Because to me, the people that get up every day and they love their kids, they love their wife or husband, they have a great life, but they're hurt inside, those people are achieving pretty great things, I think, because they see their demons, but they still persevere forward every day with love, with service. They still are kind to their fellow humans, and especially those who've really been hurt, but still continue to choose to love. What's real enlightenment? Is it that, or is it someone who can levitate because they meditated for 15 or 20 years? It's really relevant to me to, and the spiritual community can even be doing escapism, not knowing it. Because, yeah, so what if you can perform a miracle? What does it really matter? Does it matter? How much does it matter? Now, if you can heal someone who's sick, that really matters because that person's suffering.
Change their lives, yeah.
But that kind of practice isn't earned by escapism or avoiding. It's earned by facing down the demons, facing down the traumas, realigning your rainbow bridge or your chakra system, or getting the two serpents balanced again to where you can perform those types of things. That's not an easy task. That's more like warfare, if you want my perspective on it. It's a constant battle to do.
Yeah, so another mystic, Gurdjieff.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So Gurdjieff talks about different practices towards enlightenment, and he talks about, like, there's the path of the yogi or the path of the monk, and what you describe is what he would call the fourth way, which is basically the path of being in the world but not of the world, like being in the matrix and being able to live life yet not believe in life, be able to live life and offer your fullest being, but not believe in the illusion, essentially. And what he would say is that the path of the yogi or the monk, they're valid.
Oh, yeah.
If one is called to do that, if it's an authentic calling to live in the mountains and meditate, that's not necessary. I mean, I get what you're saying. The spiritual community kind of it glorifies that, and it can be escapism for people who are really called to do the fourth way, to be in this world, and that's sort of what his work was about. It's like if you're here, you're holding up a house. This is your work, and learning to do that with full presence and connect with the divine, and it's hard.
It is hard.
And I would say the people who are watching this video, like if you're a monk or a yogi, you're not going to be watching a video like this. So that's why we're giving the message that we do.
Yeah. Well, and it, it goes the same thing with the practice, like you had mentioned about, connecting with your divine aspect or just knowing who you are. Or to me, there's usually two ingredients that I need to know from a person. One, what are you after? Like, what's your goal? What do you want to do? Because if personal enlightenment is your thing, then yes, by all means, you need to be places quiet. You need to really listen. You need to go within and make it all about your own inner journey. That is true. But after your own inner journey, that's called the hero's journey, where you go through all of the inward places in here, and then you come out enlightened, which means I'm in more alignment. But see, a lot of the enlightenment is trying to go towards spirit again, away from ego. I'm going away from the physical needs to the spirit realm. So it's still not, you can't go one way or the other. It doesn't work that way. You have to stay in the center, and you have to experience the damn thing just like everybody else. That's why it says, it's why in the Bible I'm saying taking the sins of humanity on myself is not about hanging on the cross like I did. It's about getting in, the daily sacrifice is about daily sacrificing myself from my higher perspective to come into a flesh and be in the flesh every day. It's the daily sacrifice of flesh. And that's about coming in to incarnate and be a sacrifice. You're doing it every day. Everyone's doing it every day. It's not one person. It's a whole process. We're all sacrificing ourselves to take on the sins of humanity, because all of humanity is in that mindset. So we're taking on the pain, the trauma, the feeling lost, the feeling cut off from God, feeling abandoned, feeling alone, feeling frantic, wanting to make the calls that we know we shouldn't make, or drink the alcohol. That's taking on the sins of humanity. But the difference is, are you taking on those sins consciously, being an objective observer and trying to be a badass and say, okay, I can do this. I can stay focused. I can stay aligned while I'm being pummeled or suffering, versus I'm going to suffer and drown and die in it and not know what's going on. There's two, to me, true enlightenment is going through hell, but staying focused. Stay in alignment, even when you're going through hell. So if someone kills you, I'm still good because I know I'm divine. If things don't go my way, I'm still good because I know I'm divine. Even if I lose all my family members, I'm still good because I know I'm divine. That's what enlightenment means to me. It means that no matter what comes, you still choose love.
And I just remembered, like, one of the most powerful tools, again, talking about staying in alignment, and when the voice of the devil, that tempting voice, gets loud, we talked about motivational videos, essentially, which is affirmation. But one of the most powerful tools I found is prayer.
Oh yeah.
How could I forget that? Praying every morning, and whatever you believe in, whatever you believe God to be, or Holy Father, Holy Mother, like praying for that strength and guidance to do the right thing. You shared a beautiful prayer that you went through. Was Father, Mother, give me the strength, the courage, the peace of mind to do what I need to do this day. Something like that, along those lines. And
that makes it simple. I mean, it's pretty straightforward and generic, but it says everything I need. Other people might have different adjectives or whatever the words are.
Wisdom is one of mine.
Yeah. So, and that's what I say. What are you after? Someone came to me and says, I want to be enlightened. I'd just say, well, okay, but what are you after? Why do you want to be enlightened? Is it just for you? Is it for your family? Is it for a community? Is it for the world? Is it for the collective of the galaxy? What's your thing? What's your gig? Mine is simply getting in, getting dirty, figuring this thing out, bearing it all so that I can transmute it. It's like being bit by 1,000 snakes so that I can transmute the venom and then be able to be an antibody for that very venom. It's like, hey, I've been bit too. Here you go. Here's some antivenom. This should help.
So kind of going back to what we started this with abundance too, you just gave me another thought. So when people get caught up in the Ahrimanic perspective, like they get focused so much on money or status, would you say a better question for someone else is why is having this extraordinary amount of money important for me? Would you say it's the why? That's I guess this kind of goes into manifestation too, which we talked about. Is the why like the real question, like as far as actually getting what you want, what you really want in that sense?
Yeah, you have to know that above all else. If you don't know your why, you'll never figure it out.
What if my why is so I could feel like I'm better than other people?
Then you'll figure out ways to be better than other people, but it'll eventually backfire because that type of energy naturally rebounds because it doesn't. That's a house divided against itself cannot stand, because it means if it's a house built on principles, values, building materials that are not stable, it will fall. But if it's built out of things that are strong, of integrity, morals, they stand because they're built on something that's actually real, and they're not self-annihilating. Any energy that's negative, like you just articulated, something wanting to be better than others, that's a self-destructive thought. So it naturally will destroy the partaker, the one who's trying to embody that nature. It just ends up, because you reap what you sow. So whatever you put out comes back, and it will eventually destroy the very thing you're trying to build.
Very well said. Beautiful. Yeah, that's sort of, again, that's even kind of going back to a scarcity mindset. Like when you want to have money or all these Ahrimanic things to hold power or importance over others, then that's the path to hell. And there's a reason for it.
That's why there's no need to worry about the battle here, because it still has to be done. But within evil is the seeds to its own destruction. It's self-destructive. Have you noticed that anytime you feel down or negative? It's pretty self-corrosive and self-destructive. So
I have, again, the self-destructive nature in me, and that's been a lot of this work, is becoming aware of how I fueled my self-destructive nature as opposed to my divine nature. Yeah. So we all have both in us, and it's just which dragon do you want to feed?
Yeah, and that goes back to your motivation and the prayers and what do you want? And once you've decided what it is you want on a very substantial reason, it has a basis that it can stand on, a foundation that it can stand on, then you got to decide what little things will help you accomplish that, and then you do them. You become a warrior in your aspect of, okay, now I'm only going to do the things that lead me to that goal. And you do that a little every day, and it builds on itself. They say great things are achieved by piling up 1,000,000 small things. So it's not that anybody who's done anything great just all of a sudden did it in one day. They've been working on it for their whole life. They're one day at a time, they're putting another stone there and another stone, and eventually they can walk up and touch the moon.
Yeah, and so kind of looking at my stuff, what I've had, I would have a not to-do list, and we talked more about, but my not to-dos have been very clear. The big challenge in rebuilding yourself, for me, reclaiming my self-worth, is the to-do list. Like that's been the harder part, is, okay, what are the things that I need to do that remind me of this divine nature? And that can be sometimes the trickier piece, but you have to do both with your awareness. But I think it's important to have something you're moving toward. I think that ultimately needs to be more powerful than the thing you're moving away from. And so it can start with just saying no to the thing you're moving away from, using that no, setting a boundary on that. But when you start moving towards something, when you start to get more clarity there, which I don't have, I have a little bit of pieces of things I know to do, and a lot of it's just exploring different things. It's basically getting out of patterns and opening up to new possibilities, and then as something clicks, then I water more of that. 'cause I've done this before, in older versions of myself that have been slayed and then something new is rebuilt. But it's ultimately when you get to where what you're moving towards gets really powerful and resonant in you, and you just are going there very strongly. Then
and I think that's where being a teacher or a guru or an elder or shaman, I think that's where that component comes in, because in my journey, what I noticed, and you just reiterated it back, is it requires a lot of discipline, and it also requires a great deal of seeking. So, because we know what's wrong, but we don't know how to get that goal that we've set to become tangible. We can't make it a reality without knowing the steps that are required. So what I noticed is that part right there, from the place that you've been totally crushed and you want to go for it, you've decided what you want and you want to go towards the goal. Well, what are the steps? What do I do? That's where the guru or someone who's done it, someone who's suffered the onslaught of trying to do it, can help. Because, like, for me, here's the easiest way for me to put it for myself was, okay, anything that's helpful or helps me feel better, do better, think better, and act better, that's what I want. Anything other than that, it's got to go. So what I did was I said, well, okay, good water, good breath. If I breathe well, drink good water, eat good food, exercise, good sleep. Those are my 5 fundamental go-to things that are the bedrock for everything else. So if you're not getting those first 5 things, something else is going to be out of balance. If you don't get enough sleep, those others will be out of balance. If you're not getting good food and water. So I started learning that there was this almost like a way to build a house or build a temple. So my process of rebuilding my temple started with the foundation, and the cornerstone was breath. My cornerstone was breath. Then the next was water. Then the next was food. Then the next was exercise, and then sleep. Because all of those things are needs. Those aren't wants. Those are needs. If you don't have those, you're screwed. And then I could even add love onto that from other people. But once you master self-love, you don't need love from others. You're an independent, no longer codependent individual, where all self-satisfaction, all self-love, all self-fulfillment comes from the self. You're good to go. So if you have the 5 main ingredients to start building your temple, then after that, you start to branch off. Well, good food, good water isn't cutting it. I'm going to need some supplements. I need to know why this is hurting and why that doesn't feel right. And then that'll branch even further. It'll branch into, I got to go to the chiropractor. I should start doing yoga, or I should start stretching, or Pilates. So what I'm saying is, from the 5, it'll start to branch out into all these other areas. And then once you start exploring, it will start to build the temple back up, and you'll start to have the strength little by little to seek even more, and it kind of expands on itself.
Yeah, well, I you're kind of talking about the self-care. I think another important part of being a divine aligned being is what you give, like your purpose, your mission, what makes you happy. How do you tap into your creativity? What are you offering? So I think that has to go in as well, because otherwise, like if you're just consuming, that is it's important, to stay healthy, but part of health is being able to engage and offer and be a divine expression. And I realize too, this is happening on a collective level right now. There's a lot of exposure. Like I remember when I had my U2 New World Order there, motto, but UFO ET contact. One of the messages was full disclosure is coming, and we're getting disclosure of how the matrix works, how the harmonic power structures actually work, and there's all kinds of exposure. There's never been this much exposure of what's a lie, what's a fraud, what not to believe in. But what I find is, like kind of in the truther world, it gets very repetitive. It's the same stuff over and over and over again, and it's always focusing on the problem and not the solution. So when we know the problem, it's like, okay, we know what to say no to.
Yeah, we got that.
But now we've got to work. That's the not to do list, like what we're saying no to. But now we've got to work on the to do list. We've got to work on rebuilding and creating something different, creating something that makes the not to do list just obsolete, and that is much harder. I don't have the answers for that, but what I find again is just kind of the same thing you do with yourself. It's like you're exploring every little avenue of possibility, and when something clicks, then you can water that more, and that's kind of that's my belief of how we can collectively rebuild another world. When we say no, this old one that's falling apart right now, so there's going to be that rebuilding process.
Yeah, and the first thing they need to decide is, what do you want and why do you want it? Because if you want a new world, that's great, but why do you want a new world? What's the thing that what's going to give you the why, the reason that you won't give up on building that new world? Because you have to have a driving, motivating force that gives you a reason to build that new world. And if you do that, your why is the fuel, and the what you want is imperative. If people come to us and they need support and they need to breathe or whatever it is they want help with, I have to know what they want. What do you want out of this? But I also have to know their why. Why are they after it? Because I need to know their trajectory on what they want to do.
Well, we can actually, I think I can safely answer a lot of that. So what makes people mad about the things they believed in, what they're realizing now? What do you think makes them the most angry about that?
You mean in the world?
In the world, yeah.
Probably the injustice.
I would say they're being lied to.
Yeah.
Like they're. I would say they're realizing, oh, this is a big lie. This is just a big lie that's benefiting a small few people that I've been participating in. So I would say an authentic world, something that's based off of a more authentic system, is something that maybe I'm answering for people. They may not know this, but that's the opposite to me of
what we have. Yeah.
Something that's authentic, something that's transparent, that's saying, we are doing this, and this is why. Something built out of love as opposed to control, of love and reverence for life.
And equality, that we're all on a level playing field.
Well, I would say that everything matters. Everything has its place. Not everything is equal, but everything has a place in the world and value, equal value. But that's a tricky one there.
Yeah, it is. But I think you nailed it, because that is the opposite of what they got. So have you had enough of what you don't like? Are you sick of? It's like people eating candy. Are you sick of the junk food? Are you sick of the lies? Are you sick of
having your teeth being rotted out and being sick? Because
this system, the one that everybody's looking at, is rotting. It's sick. It's got. If it's not obvious by now, I don't know what to say, because there's more than enough content out there. And by the way, to all the content people, you guys are killing it. This is the work that everybody's doing to do the disclosure. That needs to be acknowledged, because, man, you and I know what it's like to be here, to be doing this, to be talking to the viewers. It's hard work. It really is, to get to the root of things, to really answer things correctly and get things delivered in a way that they can understand. But if they don't know how bad the world is, I think most people are very well aware.
But again, there's a psyop that wants to keep people focused on the not to do list and never get past that. Yeah. So that's the tricky thing about that. They're the same forces that are being talked about by a lot of the truthers. They want the truthers to talk about them and stay focused on them and not move past that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's the tricky part that I'm addressing here. Is like, once the purpose of the not to do list is to say no, not to obsess over it, but to say no.
Yeah, no. And then do something different.
And do something differently.
Yeah, because that's the part everybody misses. Like, you can watch these shows all day long, every day if you want, but when do we go from talking about it to getting up and doing things about it? And a lot of people are doing things about it. That's not what I'm saying. But what I mean is, it has to be everybody. It has to be the people out there in the world. It has to be all of you sitting watching these videos. If we all just decide enough is enough, that takes care of it. But you have to do the action steps. You actually have to change yourself, change your life, change the thoughts that you keep thinking, and then that will change the actions you keep committing.
Some of it, I think, you're moving through stages of grief. So there's stages of mourning, essentially. You're mourning the death of something that you held dear to, and so you have to keep moving through those stages as opposed to getting stuck on certain ones. And so the intention of the controller is to have you stuck,
Yeah.
and not to keep moving. But there's a grieving process there. Well, I think this is probably a good time to wrap up. But talking about abundance again, talking about living a good life individually so that we can show up as our best, and when we do that on an individual level, then we alter the collective as well. And true abundance is living in our divine nature, being aware of our divine nature, and living and honoring that.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge everybody's divine nature and how acknowledge all the hard work all of you are doing, and just to say thank you for every day getting up and doing it again, because it can get exhausting, because we're all learning on this. We get up every day. You're a little more aware of what's going on in the world, but that doesn't mean you always know what to do or what solutions. And I'm excited to have a plan and to implement it, but I think what matters more is that everybody's acknowledged and praised for doing it every day, because it's been a hell of a go. So.
All right. Well, I think let's end it on that note. Jason Abraham, the Shadow Teacher 33, and
Jonathan Johnson,
signing off. Peace be with you.